stab me? We'll ruin your life the way.
I ain't looking for this case.
Evan,
What happened to you
This is gonna sting, bitch!
has led you. Fate.
お飲み物はいかがですか？
Oh, no, thanks. Sparkling? That's the one. Thank you.
Introduction: The Smart Dumb Action Extravaganza. This analysis and explanation begins with the film's identity as a hyper-stylized action comedy directed by David Leitch, the co-director of John Wick and director of Deadpool 2 and Atomic Blonde. The film is based on Kotaro Isaka's 2010 novel Maria Beetle, retitled Bullet Train for English markets. And this analysis will explore how the adaptation transforms a Japanese crime novel into a globalized, chaotic, and deeply self-aware cinematic ride. The premise and central conflict. This analysis and explanation clarifies the core premise. Ladybug Brad Pitt, an American assassin plagued by catastrophic bad luck, is sent by his handler Maria Sandra Bullock to replace a sick colleague named Carver, a blink and you'll miss it Ryan Reynolds cameo. His mission appears simple: board a Shinkansen bullet train from Tokyo to Kyoto, retrieve a briefcase full of cash, and disembark at the next station. This analysis notes that the mission's simplicity is the film's first ironic joke. Ladybug's therapeutic backstory. A deeper analytical point here involves Ladybug's recent attendance to anger management therapy, which his handler Maria mandated. His therapist encourages him to abandon ego, avoid weapons, and focus on peaceful mission completion. This analysis explains that this therapeutic framing transforms every violent encounter into a philosophical debate about fate, responsibility, and emotional regulation, making Ladybug an unlikely action hero who would rather apologize than shoot. The train as a closed ecosystem. This analysis and explanation examines the narrative function of the Shinkansen itself, a high-speed, sealed environment with no exits between stations. The train stops for exactly 1 minute at each platform, creating real-time pressure for every confrontation. Director David Leitch uses this constraint to generate suspense, as assassins must finish their fights before the doors close or risk being carried toward an inevitable climax at Kyoto Station. Tangerine and Lemon, the British double act. Introducing the film's most beloved duo, this analysis presents Tangerine, Aaron Taylor-Johnson, and Lemon, Brian Tyree Henry, as professional kidnappers tasked with delivering both the briefcase and the White Death's son, Logan Lerman, to their crime lord employer. Their bickering, working-class British banter echoes classic British gangster films like Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels, while their contrasting personalities, Tangerine hot-headed and fashion-obsessed, Lemon calm and childlike, create constant comic friction. Lemon's Thomas the Tank Engine philosophy. One of the film's most original character traits receives full analysis here. Lemon categorizes all human beings as either Thomas, useful, kind, reliable, or Diesel, deceitful, selfish, troublemaking, based entirely on the children's television show Thomas and Friends. Remarkably, this childish framework proves accurate throughout the film. Lemon correctly identifies the prince as a Diesel before anyone else suspects her, and this analysis argues that the show's moral simplicity actually functions as sharp emotional intelligence in a world of professional liars. The prince, manipulation as a weapon. This analysis and explanation turns to Joey King's character, the prince, a teenage assassin who initially appears to be an innocent schoolgirl. In reality, she is the White Death's estranged daughter, and she has pushed a young boy off a roof to manipulate his father, Yuichi Kimura Andrew Koji, into boarding the train to seek revenge. Her weapon is not a gun or knife but psychological coercion, making her the film's most chilling presence despite her small stature. Yuichi Kimura, the father's grief. Andrew Koji's character, known simply as the father in the credits, brings genuine emotional weight to the chaos. His son lies in a hospital bed after the prince's attack, and Kimura boards the train intending to kill her. This analysis explains that Kimura represents traditional Japanese masculinity, honorable, restrained, and duty-bound, contrasting sharply with the Western assassin's theatricality. His arc transforms from revenge to protection, ultimately choosing to save Ladybug rather than pursue vengeance. The Elder, Wisdom and the Seven Spots. Hiroyuki Sanada plays the Elder, Kimura's father, and a retired assassin of legendary skill. He boards the train seeking revenge against the White Death for murdering his wife. In a key conversation with Ladybug, the Elder explains that a ladybug's 7 spots represent the 7 sorrows of the Virgin Mary. The insect carries the world's misfortunes so others may live in peace. This analysis argues that this speech reframes Ladybug's bad luck as a form of sacrifice rather than punishment, introducing the film's central philosophical theme. The Wolf, Revenge Misplaced. Bad Bunny appears briefly as the Wolf, an assassin whose bride was poisoned with a deadly venom called Tsuchigumo on their wedding day. He has tracked the venom's signature to the bullet train, believing Ladybug is responsible. This analysis notes that the Wolf's entire arc is a tragic misunderstanding. The Hornet, Zazie Beetz, is the true poisoner, and his death in the luggage car, impaled by his own knife during a fight with Ladybug, exemplifies the film's theme that blind revenge leads only to self-destruction. The Hornet, the unseen killer. Zazie Beetz's character, the Hornet, is a master of toxicology who uses a venomous snake and poison-tipped darts. She killed the Wolf's wife and also poisoned the White Death's son, which is why Tangerine and Lemon are transporting him on the train. This analysis explains that the Hornet operates as a stealth predator, hiding in plain sight among passengers, and her confrontation with Ladybug in the bar car, using bottles, shelves, and the escaped snake as weapons, is a masterclass in environmental action choreography. The White Death, puppet master revealed. Michael Shannon plays the film's primary antagonist, a Russian-born Yakuza boss known as the White Death. For most of the runtime, he exists only as a name spoken in fearful whispers. This analysis reveals that his master plan, explained during the climactic monologue at Kyoto Station, involves hiring every assassin on the train because each one contributed, directly or indirectly, to his wife's death. He intends for them to kill each other, saving him the trouble of individual revenge. The wife's hit-and-run, the original sin. The White Death's wife was killed in a hit-and-run accident caused by Carver, the assassin Ladybug replaced. This analysis identifies this event as the narrative's original sin, from which all other conflicts flow. The White Death left his wife's side to deal with a massacre committed by Tangerine and Lemon in Bolivia. The Hornet poisoned the surgeon who could have saved her. The Wolf was present in the criminal underworld that failed to protect her. Every character is complicit, and the train becomes an instrument of cosmic justice. The son is bait. Logan Lerman appears briefly as the White Death's son, a spoiled, arrogant young man who has been shot with the Hornet's venom. Tangerine and Lemon are delivering him to his father for a ransom. But this analysis explains that the White Death never intended to pay. He placed his own son on the train as bait to attract the other assassins, demonstrating a chilling willingness to sacrifice family for revenge. The son dies from the venom after Lemon refuses to administer the antidote. The briefcase, a MacGuffin with teeth. The silver briefcase that everyone fights over contains cash, but also serves a deeper narrative purpose. This analysis explains that the briefcase is rigged by the prince with explosives triggered by a hair tie. It functions as a classic MacGuffin, an object characters pursue that has little inherent importance, but its explosive nature makes it an active participant in the climax. Ladybug's refusal to open it, despite multiple temptations, shows his character growth from curious victim to disciplined survivor. The punctuality gag as structural device. Japan's Shinkansen is famous for its average delay of less than 1 minute. This analysis and explanation highlights how the film weaponizes this cultural fact. The train stops at each station for exactly 60 seconds, creating multiple sequences where characters fight their way toward closing doors. The final derailment occurs because the train is running behind schedule, a deeply ironic Japanese punchline where the ultimate symbol of order is destroyed by a minute deviation from perfection. Action choreography, ballet of violence. David Leitch, a former stuntman, choreographs action as dance. This analysis compares the fight sequences to Gene Kelly musicals. Limbs extend in rhythmic arcs, bodies collide in predictable beats, and the camera moves in long, unbroken takes. Brad Pitt performed 95% of his own stunts, including a prolonged fight sequence in which his character is progressively more injured, bleeding, and exhausted, a realistic depiction of violence rarely seen in Hollywood action films. The luggage car fight, claustrophobic genius. Ladybug vs. the Wolf takes place in the luggage car, a narrow space filled with rolling suitcases and overhead racks. This analysis explains that the confined space forces both fighters to use the environment creatively. Bags become shields, straps become garrotes, and the luggage carousel becomes a rotating death trap. The fight ends with the wolf accidentally stabbing himself with his own knife. Ladybug's luck, manifesting as accidental survival rather than skill. The bar car fight, liquid geometry. When Ladybug fights the Hornet, the bar car's shelves of bottles become weapons. This analysis describes how each broken bottle releases a different colored liquid: amber whiskey, red wine, clear vodka, creating a Jackson Pollock of blood and alcohol. The Hornet's pet snake escapes during the fight and later returns to deliver the killing bite to its owner after Ladybug denies her the antivenom. The sequence demonstrates the film's Chekhov's arsenal approach. Every object introduced will eventually be used. The Mamamon mascot costume. A seemingly random detail, a large furry mascot costume for a Japanese children's character named Mamamon, receives full analytical attention here. Ladybug wears the costume during one fight, its oversized paws making weapons difficult to hold. Later, the costume cushions his fall when he jumps from the moving train. This analysis argues that the costume represents the absurdity of the film's world. A children's character becomes both a disguise and a safety device for a professional killer. The snake as narrative thread. The hornet snake, named Tsuchigumo, Japanese for ground spider, escapes its container early in the film and appears in the background of multiple scenes before its final reappearance. This analysis praises this as classical Chekhovian plotting. The snake is not a random prop, but a ticking clock. When Ladybug denies the hornet the antivenom, the snake bites its owner, killing her with her own weapon. The snake then slithers away, surviving as the film's only innocent creature. The water bottle, Fiji as foreshadowing. A bottle of Fiji water appears repeatedly throughout the train, held by different passengers. This analysis explains that Lemon eventually drinks from this bottle, which the prince has laced with sedatives, causing him to pass out and allowing her to take control of the briefcase. The branded bottle becomes a visual cue for attentive viewers. Its reappearance signals that someone is being manipulated. This level of detail rewards repeat viewings. The hair tie on the gun. The prince places a small hair tie around the trigger of a gun she gives to her father, the White Death. This analysis reveals that the hair tie prevents the trigger from fully engaging, causing the gun to explode when fired. Ladybug notices the hair tie during the climax and refuses to use the weapon, his observational skill saving his life. The hair tie is a tiny object with enormous consequences, exemplifying the film's belief that salvation lies in paying attention. Thomas the Tank Engine stickers. Lemon covers his belongings with stickers of Thomas the Tank Engine characters. When the prince steals his wallet, she unknowingly reveals her diesel nature to Lemon because she fails to return a sticker to its correct position. This analysis argues that Lemon's childish obsession is actually a sophisticated security system. Only someone who truly understands his moral framework would know where each sticker belongs. The prince's ignorance exposes her deception. The elder's death and legacy. In the final duel, the elder fights the White Death with a katana while the train derails around them. Both men deliver fatal wounds. The elder impales the White Death but dies from gunshots. This analysis explains that the elder's death completes his character arc. He boards the train seeking revenge for his wife, but dies protecting Kimura and Ladybug, transforming from Avenger to Guardian. His final words pass the Seven Sorrows philosophy to Ladybug, anointing him as the next carrier. Lemon's survival. The Tangerine Truck. The film's most audacious plot twist arrives in the post-credits scene. Lemon survived falling into a river after being shot by the prince. He limped to a road, flagged down a truck carrying tangerines, his partner Tangerine's namesake, and drove it directly into the prince as she prepared to execute the survivors. This analysis celebrates this as the ultimate punchline to a film built on absurdist humor. The Thomas character, the one dismissed as naive, delivers the final vehicular killing blow. The prince's death, poetic justice. The prince, who pushed a child off a roof to manipulate his father, dies when a truck of tangerines runs her over. This analysis interprets this as poetic justice. She treated human beings as objects, and she is killed by an object, specifically, a truck full of the fruit that names the partner of the man she betrayed. Her death is sudden, unceremonious, and almost comedic, denying her the dramatic villain's death she craved. Tangerine's death, tragic loyalty. Tangerine dies protecting Lemon, shot by the prince after he refuses to abandon his partner. This analysis notes that Tangerine's death is the film's most emotionally affecting moment because their relationship, bickering, codependent, deeply loyal, has been the comic heart of the movie. His final act is to call Lemon by his real name, a moment of vulnerability he has avoided all film. Humanizing the fast-talking fashion plate just before he expires. Maria's post-credits scene. Luck unresolved. In the post-credits scene, Maria, Sandra Bullock, picks up Ladybug in her car. As he declares that his luck might finally be changing, a falling pole crushes her vehicle. He smiles, choosing to interpret this as something good that will come later. This analysis explains that the film deliberately refuses to resolve whether luck is real or a matter of perspective. Ladybug's happiness depends not on his circumstances, but on his interpretation of them, a distinctly stoic conclusion. Color palette as emotional mapping. Production designer David Schuneman and cinematographer Jonathan Sela created distinct color zones on the train. This analysis identifies the business car as cool blues and sterile whites, order, control, the White Death's influence. Passenger cars as warm oranges and yellows, chaos, violence, the assassin's battleground, and the bar car as deep reds and purples, danger, sensuality, death. Characters move between these zones as their emotional states shift, with Ladybug progressing from blue, anxious, to orange, engaged, to red, accepting. The LED windows, acting against reality. The production built 3 full train cars on soundstages in Los Angeles, with LED screens outside the windows displaying moving footage of the Japanese countryside. This analysis notes that this technique allowed actors to react to real passing scenery, improving performance authenticity. The screens also enabled real-time lighting changes. When the train passes through a tunnel, the car instantly darkens, affecting fight choreography. Soundtrack, Japanese covers of Western hits. Composer Dominic Lewis described his score as all vibe and no technique. This analysis highlights specific tracks. A Japanese-language cover of the Bee Gees' Stayin' Alive plays during an early action sequence. Its ironic lyrics, whether you're a brother or whether you're a mother, commenting on the assassin's familial betrayals. A Japanese cover of Bonnie Tyler's Holding Out for a Hero accompanies the climax, its power ballad earnestness undercutting the violence with genuine emotion. Cultural hybridity, American film, Japanese setting. Based on a Japanese novel but filmed by an American director with a predominantly Western cast, Bullet Train exists in a space of deliberate cultural hybridity. This analysis acknowledges criticism that Japanese characters are underrepresented. Only Kimura, the elder, and the conductor, Masaoka, are major Japanese roles, but argues that the film uses this tension intentionally. The assassins are tourists in Japan, outsiders who disrespect local customs, wearing shoes indoors, speaking loudly, while benefiting from Japanese infrastructure. The race-swapping controversy. Some critics noted that the original novel's Japanese characters were replaced by Western actors for the film adaptation. This analysis presents both sides. Detractors view this as erasure, a Hollywood pattern of telling Japanese stories through white protagonists. Defenders argue that the international cast reflects the globalized criminal underworld, where Russian crime lords, British smugglers, American freelancers, and Japanese elders intersect. The film never pretends to be authentic Japanese cinema. It is a Western genre film set in Japan. Critical reception, the Rotten Tomatoes divide. The film holds a 53% critics score on Rotten Tomatoes, but an audience score above 80%. This analysis explains the divide. Critics faulted the overcomplicated plot. One called it the disabled love child of Reservoir Dogs and Kill Bill. Pacing issues in the second act, and a third act that goes off the rails. Audiences, however, embraced the film's self-aware absurdity, praising Brad Pitt's comedic performance and the chemistry between Taylor-Johnson and Henry. Box office performance, modest success. Opening with 106,026 admissions on its first day in France. Brad Pitt's best opening since Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. The film grossed $239.3 million worldwide against a $90 million budget. This analysis notes that this makes Bullet Train a modest box office success, though not the franchise-launching blockbuster Sony may have hoped. Its performance was strong in Asia and Europe but softer in North America, where it competed with Top Gun: Maverick. Comparison to Smokin' Aces and Shoot 'Em Up. This analysis situates Bullet Train within a lineage of hyper-stylized action comedies from the 2000s, including Smokin' Aces, Multiple Assassins, Same Target, Crank, Relentless Momentum, and Shoot 'Em Up, Absurdist Violence. These films prioritize kinetic energy and visual invention over narrative coherence, and Bullet Train updates the formula with better choreography, higher production values, and genuine emotional beats that the earlier films lacked. The Stoic Philosophy of the Seven Sorrows. The elder's speech about the Ladybug's 7 spots representing the Virgin Mary's sorrows is the film's philosophical center. This analysis explains Stoic philosophy as presented here. We cannot control what happens to us, only our response. Ladybug's bad luck is reframed as a burden he carries so others may live peacefully. The film never confirms whether this is true or a comforting fiction, but Ladybug chooses to believe it, and that choice transforms him from victim to hero. Ladybug as anti-John Wick. Where John Wick is a legendary, feared assassin whose name inspires terror, Ladybug is a bumbling, apologetic killer whose name, assigned by his handler, he hates. This analysis contrasts the two Leach-directed franchises. John Wick operates in a world of honor and rules, while Ladybug operates in a world of chaos and coincidence. Wick solves problems with precision. Ladybug solves them by accident. Both are competent, but Ladybug's competence is indistinguishable from luck. The film's relationship to Tarantino. Reviewers frequently compared Bullet Train to Quentin Tarantino's work, specifically Pulp Fiction, nonlinear structure, hitmen discussing philosophy, and Kill Bill, Revenme, Japanese iconography. This analysis argues that while Tarantino uses dialogue and pop culture references to build characters, Bullet Train uses action and environmental gags. Tarantino's violence is stylized but consequential. Bullet Train's violence is cartoonish and reversible. Lemon survives a gunshot wound that should be fatal. The second act pacing problem. Many critics identified a slowdown between the Hornet's death and the arrival at Kyoto Station. This analysis acknowledges the criticism. The film introduces the White Death's backstory through monologue rather than action, and several chase sequences repeat the same beats. Character almost escapes, character is pulled back. However, defenders argue that this slowdown allows the Thomas the Tank Engine philosophy to develop fully, making Lemon's eventual survival more satisfying. The Stoic Philosophy of the Seven Sorrows. The elder's speech about the Ladybug's 7 spots representing the Virgin Mary's sorrows is the film's philosophical center. This analysis explains Stoic philosophy as presented here. We cannot control what happens to us, only our response. Ladybug's bad luck is reframed as a burden he carries so others may live peacefully. The film never confirms whether this is true or a comforting fiction, but Ladybug chooses to believe it, and that choice transforms him from victim to hero. Ladybug as anti-John Wick. Where John Wick is a legendary, feared assassin whose name inspires terror, Ladybug is a bumbling, apologetic killer whose name, assigned by his handler, he hates. This analysis contrasts the two Leach-directed franchises. John Wick operates in a world of honor and rules, while Ladybug operates in a world of chaos and coincidence. Wick solves problems with precision. Ladybug solves them by accident. Both are competent, but Ladybug's competence is indistinguishable from luck. The film's relationship to Tarantino. Reviewers frequently compared Bullet Train to Quentin Tarantino's work, specifically Pulp Fiction, nonlinear structure, hitmen discussing philosophy, and Kill Bill, Revenme, Japanese iconography. This analysis argues that while Tarantino uses dialogue and pop culture references to build characters, Bullet Train uses action and environmental gags. Tarantino's violence is stylized but consequential. Bullet Train's violence is cartoonish and reversible. Lemon survives a gunshot wound that should be fatal. The second act pacing problem. Many critics identified a slowdown between the Hornet's death and the arrival at Kyoto Station. This analysis acknowledges the criticism. The film introduces the White Death's backstory through monologue rather than action, and several chase sequences repeat the same beats. Character almost escapes, character is pulled back. However, defenders argue that this slowdown allows the Thomas the Tank Engine philosophy to develop fully, making Lemon's eventual survival more satisfying. The final act derailment. The train crashes into downtown Kyoto in a massive CGI spectacle that some viewers found excessive. This analysis notes that the derailment is the film's most expensive shot, involving practical effects, actual train cars tipped over, augmented by digital extensions. The chaos of the derailment mirrors the chaos of the plot. Just as the train leaves its tracks, the narrative abandons any pretense of realism. Characters walk away from crashes that would kill real humans because the film has earned cartoon physics. The duel on the derailed train. The Elder versus the White Death takes place on the side of the overturned train, rain falling, sirens approaching. This analysis contrasts this duel with the film's earlier fights. Where previous battles used environment, humor, and improvisation, this duel is traditional, almost samurai cinema serious. The Elder bows before attacking. The White Death uses a gun against a sword, violating honor but demonstrating his pragmatism. The Elder's victory is Pyrrhic. He dies, but he dies with dignity, having completed his mission. Lemon's diagnosis of the prince. Early in the film, Lemon tells Tangerine that the prince is a diesel after a brief interaction. This analysis explains that Lemon's framework, based entirely on the children's show, allows him to see through her performance because she fails the usefulness test. Diesels in Thomas and Friends are deceitful and self-serving. The prince manipulates others for personal gain. Lemon cannot articulate his suspicion logically, but his emotional intelligence, channeled through this childish framework, is correct. The son's death and Lemon's refusal. When the White Death's son begs Lemon for the antivenom that would save his life, Lemon refuses, saying, "You're a diesel." This analysis argues that this moment is the film's moral turning point. Lemon chooses to let a young man die because he has judged him unworthy of saving. The film does not present this as heroic. Tangerine is horrified, but it is consistent with Lemon's worldview. Thomas characters help others. Diesel characters do not deserve help. The film leaves viewers to decide if this morality is childishly simple or chillingly utilitarian. Tangerine's fashion as character. Tangerine wears a brown checked suit, white sneakers, and tinted glasses, a deliberate 1970s aesthetic that one reviewer called a bug-eyed fashion plate from 1976. This analysis explains that his clothing signals his insecurity. He needs to look professional because he fears he is not. Lemon, by contrast, wears casual, comfortable clothes, confident in his abilities. When Tangerine dies, his suit is torn and bloody. His armor failed him, but his loyalty did not. The conductor's suffering. Masi Oka plays the train conductor, a minor character who endures constant abuse from the assassins. He is tied up, threatened, and eventually forced to continue driving as the train accelerates toward disaster. This analysis argues that the conductor represents the ordinary Japanese citizen caught between violent outsiders. His suffering is played for comedy. He complains about paperwork while held at gunpoint. But his survival, he jumps from the train before the crash, suggests that innocence, not violence, is the film's ultimate value. The snake's survival. The hornet snake, Tsuchigumo, is the only animal character in the film. It kills its owner, but otherwise harms no one. This analysis notes that the snake slithers away from the crashed train into the Kyoto streets, free for the first time. In a film about assassins killing each other, the venomous predator is the one character who escapes unscathed, a dark joke about who the real monsters are. The post-credits scene as emotional resolution. Many action films use post-credits scenes to tease sequels. Bullet Train uses its post-credits scene to resolve Lemon's fate and deliver the final joke. This analysis praises this choice as emotionally intelligent. Audiences invested in Lemon's survival receive confirmation that he lived, and the Tangerine truck is a callback to his partnership with Tangerine, honoring their relationship even after Tangerine's death. The scene ends the film on a laugh rather than a cliffhanger. Maria's car and the falling pole. The final shot of the film, Maria's car crushed by a falling pole, is deliberately ambiguous. This analysis offers two interpretations. Either Ladybug's bad luck is real and has now destroyed Maria's vehicle, or the falling pole is a random accident that Ladybug reframes as something good coming later. The film refuses to adjudicate between these possibilities, suggesting that belief in luck is a choice. Ladybug chooses optimism, and the film ends on his smiling face. Brad Pitt's performance as physical comedy. At 58, Brad Pitt performs stunts that actors half his age would refuse. This analysis highlights his commitment to physical comedy. He slips on water bottles, crashes into luggage racks, and delivers lines while bleeding from multiple wounds. His performance channels Buster Keaton, the stone-faced everyman enduring impossible circumstances, rather than traditional action heroes. Pitt's willingness to look foolish makes Ladybug sympathetic. He is not invincible, he is just stubborn. Maria's car and the falling pole. The final shot of the film, Maria's car crushed by a falling pole, is deliberately ambiguous. This analysis offers two interpretations. Either Ladybug's bad luck is real and has now destroyed Maria's vehicle, or the falling pole is a random accident that Ladybug reframes as something good coming later. The film refuses to adjudicate between these possibilities, suggesting that belief in luck is a choice. Ladybug chooses optimism, and the film ends on his smiling face. Brad Pitt's performance as physical comedy. At 58, Brad Pitt performs stunts that actors half his age would refuse. This analysis highlights his commitment to physical comedy. He slips on water bottles, crashes into luggage racks, and delivers lines while bleeding from multiple wounds. His performance channels Buster Keaton, the stone-faced everyman enduring impossible circumstances, rather than traditional action heroes. Pitt's willingness to look foolish makes Ladybug sympathetic. He is not invincible, he is just stubborn. The ensemble cast chemistry. The casting director deserves credit for assembling actors who elevate the thin premise. This analysis notes that Aaron Taylor Johnson and Brian Tyree Henry had never worked together before, but developed a natural banter that drives the film's emotional core. Joey King's coldness contrasts with Andrew Koji's warmth. Hiroyuki Sanada brings gravitas to a role that could have been stereotypical. Each actor understands the film's tone, cartoonish but not stupid, and commits fully. The novel versus the film. Kotaro Isaka's original novel Maria Beetle is set entirely in Japan with Japanese characters. This analysis explains that the film changed the setting's cultural context but kept the novel's plot structure. Multiple assassins, a bullet train, a briefcase, a crime lord seeking revenge. The film adds the Thomas the Tank Engine philosophy, the Ladybug's Seven Sorrows, and most of the humor. Isaka has reportedly approved of the adaptation, appreciating its willingness to reinterpret rather than translate. David Leitch's directorial signature. Leitch, a former stuntman who co-directed the first John Wick, brings specific trademarks to Bullet Train. Long takes during action sequences, clear geography, viewers always know where characters are relative to each other, and violence that is brutal but not graphic. This analysis compares his style to John Woo's heroic bloodshed films. Both directors treat gunfights as musical numbers, with rhythm and composition prioritized over realism. The film's relationship to anime. Many Western reviewers noted that Bullet Train feels like a live-action anime. This analysis explains why. The exaggerated character designs, the prince's schoolgirl outfit, the wolf's wedding tuxedo, the superhuman feats, surviving train crashes, falling from buildings, and the emotional earnestness. Characters deliver sincere speeches about revenge while bleeding. The film never winks at the audience or apologizes for its absurdity, which is precisely how anime operates. The absence of police. Throughout the film, No police officers respond to the violence aboard the train. This analysis argues that this is a deliberate genre convention rather than a plot hole. Like John Wick's Continental Hotel or Kill Bill's Yakuza Underworld, Bullet Train posits a parallel criminal society where assassins operate without legal interference. The train becomes a sovereign space, governed not by Japanese law, but by the White Death's revenge logic. The train as character. The Shinkansen is not merely a setting, but an active participant. This analysis notes that the train's schedule determines plot beats, its layout determines fight choreography, and its destruction provides the climax. The train is indifferent to the assassins. It runs on time regardless of who lives or dies, making it an appropriately Japanese antagonist, orderly, efficient, and utterly unconcerned with individual human drama. The film's central question, is luck real? Ladybug believes he is cursed. The elder believes he carries the world's sorrows. The film never confirms which interpretation is correct. This analysis argues that the film's ambiguity is its greatest strength. It refuses to provide a comforting answer. Bad things happen randomly. Good things happen randomly. The only choice is how to interpret events. Ladybug chooses to see his luck as meaningful, and that meaning-making is itself a form of heroism. The White Death's motivation, grief as evil. Unlike many action villains who seek power or money, the White Death seeks only revenge for his wife's death. This analysis explains that his motivation is understandable. Anyone would grieve, but his methods, sacrificing his son, manipulating his daughter, hiring assassins to kill each other, are monstrous. The film suggests that grief does not justify evil, it merely explains it. The White Death dies alone, having destroyed everyone who might have loved him. The prince's motivation, daddy issues. The prince wants her father's approval. She has spent her life trying to prove herself worthy of the White Death's attention, and she boards the train intending to deliver the briefcase and kill his enemies. This analysis notes that her father's rejection, he refuses to even look at her during the climax, is more devastating than any bullet. She dies having failed to earn his love, a tragedy disguised as a villain's defeat. Kimura's son, the innocent. The young boy pushed off a roof by the prince survives but remains hospitalized throughout the film. This analysis argues that the son represents everything the assassins have lost. Innocence, safety, a future. Kimura fights to return to his son, and his survival means the boy will have a father. In a film about killers, the most important character is the one who never appears on screen except in a hospital bed. The elder's wife, the unseen loss. The elder's wife was killed by the White Death years before the film begins. This analysis notes that her death motivates the elder's entire journey, yet she never appears in flashback or photograph. She is an absence, a hole in the narrative that the elder fills with revenge. When he dies, he joins her in death, their reunion implied but never shown. The film respects their privacy, keeping their love off-screen and therefore sacred. The film's runtime, 126 minutes. At just over 2 hours, Bullet Train is longer than most action comedies. This analysis notes that the runtime allows for character development. Lemon and Tangerine's relationship, Ladybug's therapy journey, Kimura's grief, that shorter films would sacrifice. The pacing is uneven, but the extra minutes mean that deaths have emotional weight. When Tangerine dies, audiences have spent an hour with him. That time investment pays off. Why the film works despite its flaws. This analysis concludes that Bullet Train works because it knows exactly what it is. A live-action cartoon where coincidences are plot devices, survival is arbitrary, and the good guys win through a combination of luck and stubborn optimism. The film does not aspire to realism or profundity. It aspires to entertain, and it succeeds. Turn off your brain, the film suggests, and watch Brad Pitt try to kill half the cast of Atlanta. That is not an insult. That is the mission statement. The legacy of Bullet Train. Released in summer 2022, Bullet Train arrived as audiences returned to theaters after pandemic closures. This analysis notes that its box office success, combined with positive word of mouth, suggests a future as a cult classic. Already, fans debate whether Lemon or Tangerine is the better character, whether the prince is a great villain or an annoying one, and whether the Thomas the Tank Engine philosophy is genius or ridiculous. These debates are the mark of a film that, however flawed, refuses to be forgotten. Final summary: style over substance, but what style? This final analysis paragraph concludes that Bullet Train is not a great film in the traditional sense. Its plot is convoluted. Its treatment of Japanese culture is superficial. Its third act is too long. But as pure entertainment, it succeeds magnificently. Brad Pitt proves he can still carry a physical comedy. The supporting cast is uniformly excellent. And the final image, Lemon driving a truck of tangerines through a teenage assassin, is the kind of absurdist punchline that justifies the entire runtime. The film belongs to a lineage of hyper-stylized action comedies that prioritize fun over meaning, and within that lineage, it is one of the best. The film's opening sequence establishes its tonal identity immediately, showing Ladybug standing on a Tokyo platform while motivational platitudes play through his earpiece. And this analysis notes that the contrast between spiritual self-help rhetoric and imminent bloody violence sets up every subsequent joke. Ladybug's therapist encourages him to visualize success and release his ego, but the universe immediately punishes his attempts at peace by placing him on a train full of killers, and this irony becomes the film's structural backbone. The Shinkansen platform itself is immaculately clean and orderly, filled with bowing businessmen and uniformed conductors. So Ladybug's scruffy American appearance marks him as an outsider who will never understand Japanese social codes. Maria's voice in his ear provides constant commentary on his performance, functioning as a Greek chorus that reminds viewers how ridiculous the situation is while also grounding Ladybug in a real relationship. The briefcase changes hands so many times that keeping track becomes a game. And this analysis argues that the object's meaningless is precisely the point, because assassins kill each other for reasons they have long forgotten. Each character believes their mission is unique and important, but the White Death's revelation proves that all missions are threads in a single tapestry of revenge, and no one escapes the pattern. The film's treatment of coincidence borders on the theological, because events that seem random, a snake escaping, a water bottle being moved, a sticker falling off, are revealed to have causal chains stretching back years. Ladybug's refusal to carry a gun is presented as therapy progress, but this analysis suggests it is actually a survival strategy, because unarmed men are underestimated and therefore more dangerous. The train's public announcement system continues to function throughout the chaos, cheerfully announcing upcoming stations while bodies pile up in the aisles, and this bureaucratic indifference to violence is deeply Japanese in its politeness. Tangerine's obsession with punctuality mirrors the Shinkansen's own obsession, making him the train's human equivalent, and his death represents the destruction of order itself. Lemon's survival instinct manifests as childlike wonder, because he approaches danger with the same curiosity a child brings to a new toy, and this disarming quality makes him impossible to predict. The prince's schoolgirl uniform is her armor, allowing her to move through the train unnoticed while adults dismiss her as harmless. And this analysis notes that she weaponizes the very misogyny that would otherwise constrain her. Kimura's journey from vengeful father to protective father is completed when he chooses to save Ladybug rather than kill the White Death, because saving a stranger is the opposite of the selfish revenge that motivated him initially. The Elder's katana has a history that the film never explains, but its perfect condition and ceremonial wrapping suggest it has been passed down through generations, making it a character in its own right. Ladybug's name was assigned by Maria as a joke, but the Elder's speech transforms the joke into prophecy, because ladybugs actually do carry the weight of agricultural misfortune so that crops may survive. The film's color palette shifts subtly as the train approaches Kyoto, moving from the cool blues of the business car to the warm oranges of the passenger cars to the deep reds of the final confrontation, and this chromatic progression mirrors Ladybug's emotional journey from anxiety to engagement to acceptance. Each assassination method is tailored to its practitioner's psychology, because the hornet uses poison that kills slowly and invisibly, reflecting her patience and her desire to remain unseen. The wolf attacks directly and dies directly, his straightforward approach to violence proving inadequate against a world of deception and coincidence. Tangerine favors close-range gunfire and sharp insults, both of which require proximity and confidence, and his death comes when he is separated from Lemon, his source of emotional stability. Lemon's preferred weapon is his own body, because he tackles, grapples, and throws himself at enemies with the reckless abandon of a child playing superhero, and this physicality makes him the film's most kinetic presence. The White Death never boards the train until the climax, remaining an off-screen presence whose name alone generates fear, and this absence makes him more terrifying than any on-screen villain could be. His wife's death is described in clinical detail during his monologue, But the film never shows her face, because she exists only as an absence that motivates action, not as a person with her own agency. The hit-and-run that killed her was committed by Carver, the assassin Ladybug replaced, meaning that Ladybug's entire ordeal is the result of someone else's sick day, and this cosmic unfairness is the film's darkest joke. Carver's brief appearance in a photograph shows him smiling, unaware that his minor accident has triggered a chain reaction that will kill dozens, and this analysis notes that the film is about unintended consequences more than intentional violence. The snake's name, Tsuchigumo, translates to ground spider, and refers to a Japanese mythological creature that traps travelers, making the snake a perfect symbol for the train itself, which traps all these assassins together. The antivenom for the hornet's poison is carried in a small case that changes hands multiple times, becoming a MacGuffin within a MacGuffin, and its final disposition, Lemon refusing to give it to the dying son, is the film's most morally ambiguous moment. Lemon's judgment that the son is a diesel comes after observing the son's arrogance and entitlement, but the son is also a young man dying of poison, and Lemon's refusal to help him challenges viewers to decide where compassion ends and justice begins. Tangerine's reaction to Lemon's refusal is horror, because Tangerine operates on a professional code that values contracts over personal morality, and his partner's ethical rigidity threatens their livelihood. The briefcase's explosive rigging is discovered when Ladybug notices a hair tie wrapped around the trigger, and this analysis praises the film for rewarding attentive viewers while punishing those who look away during quiet moments. The hair tie belonged to the prince, who placed it there hours earlier, and its presence is a physical reminder that every object on the train has been touched by multiple hands, each leaving traces. The film's fight choreography was designed by Greg Rementer, who worked with Leach on John Wick, and this analysis notes that the bullet train fights are deliberately messier than Wick's precise gun fu, because Ladybug is not a legendary assassin, but a lucky fool. Brad Pitt trained for 4 months before filming, learning specific techniques for falling safely because his character spends most of the movie being thrown into things, and his willingness to take physical punishment sells the comedy. The luggage car fight required Bad Bunny to learn knife choreography in 2 weeks, and his performance as the wolf is almost entirely physical because his character speaks only Spanish, creating a language barrier that isolates him further. The bar car fight used 200 breakaway bottles, each filled with colored liquid, and the cleanup between takes took 45 minutes, but the final sequence required only 3 cuts, creating the illusion of a single continuous struggle. The train's interior was built on a gimbal that could tilt up to 30 degrees, allowing the actors to experience real centrifugal force during the derailment sequence, and their genuine disorientation translates to the screen. The LED screens outside the windows displayed footage shot from an actual Shinkansen cab, meaning that the actors were reacting to real Japanese countryside passing at real speed, and this authenticity grounds the absurd violence in physical reality. The sound design emphasizes the difference between the train's mechanical regularity and the assassin's chaotic violence, because the Shinkansen's hum continues uninterrupted while gunshots and screams erupt around it. Each character has a distinct footstep sound, with Tangerine's leather soles clicking authoritatively, Lemon's sneakers squeaking childishly, and the prince's school shoes tapping innocently, and this auditory detail rewards headphone viewing. The film's musical score incorporates train sounds, using the rhythm of wheels on tracks as a percussion track, and this integration of industrial noise into melody reflects the train's role as both setting and character. The Japanese covers of Western songs were performed by local artists specifically for the film, and this analysis notes that the decision to use covers rather than originals creates a sense of familiarity that is slightly wrong, mirroring the assassin's own displacement in a foreign country. Stayin' Alive plays during a sequence where no one is staying alive, and the irony is so heavy that the film almost breaks the fourth wall, but Pitt's deadpan expression keeps it grounded. Holding Out for a Hero plays during the Elder's final duel, and the song's earnestness transforms the violence into something almost sacred, because the Elder is genuinely heroic in a way that no other character is. The absence of traditional Japanese instruments from the score is a deliberate choice, because the film is not about Japan but about foreigners in Japan, and the music reflects their Western perspective. The final crash sequence is accompanied by silence for exactly 12 seconds before the music returns, and that silence allows viewers to process the destruction without emotional manipulation, making the impact more powerful. Composer Dominic Lewis recorded the score with a 60-piece orchestra in London, but he processed the recordings through vintage synthesizers to create a hybrid sound that is neither fully organic nor fully electronic, reflecting the film's own hybrid identity. The film's release was delayed several times due to the COVID-19 pandemic, and this analysis notes that the delay allowed for additional post-production work on the train crash sequence, which required more than a year of visual effects labor. Sony Pictures marketed the film heavily toward young male audiences, releasing trailers that emphasized the action and comedy while downplaying the philosophical elements. But the film's strongest audience reactions came from the Thomas the Tank Engine jokes. The film's rating for strong violence and language limited its box office potential, but the producers argued that a PG-13 version would have gutted the film's identity because the assassins need to swear and bleed to be believable. International box office was strongest in Japan, where audiences appreciated the accurate depiction of Shinkansen interiors, even as they questioned why so few Japanese characters appeared on screen. The film's Chinese release was cancelled due to content restrictions, and this analysis notes that the White Death's Russian heritage became a minor controversy in Eastern European markets, where some viewers objected to the villain's nationality. Home video sales exceeded expectations, with the film becoming one of Sony's top digital rentals of 2022, and this success suggests that Bullet Train will find its largest audience through streaming rather than theaters. The film's deleted scenes include an extended backstory for the wolf that explains his wedding day massacre in more detail, but the scene was cut because Bad Bunny's acting in Spanish was too naturalistic for the film's cartoonish tone. Another deleted scene shows Ladybug attempting to meditate in the train bathroom, only to be interrupted by an elderly passenger asking for directions, and this scene was cut for pacing despite being one of Pitt's funniest performances. The alternate ending filmed but not used showed Lemon actually dying in the river, with Tangerine's ghost appearing to him in a dream, but test audiences rejected the supernatural element as inconsistent with the film's otherwise grounded absurdity. The post-credits scene was shot in a single day, with Sandra Bullock flying to Los Angeles specifically for the shoot, and her line about Ladybug's luck was improvised after the director asked for something ambiguous but optimistic. The Tangerine truck that kills the prince was a real vehicle found by the props department, and the driver who appears briefly in the shot was the actual truck owner, who had no idea he was being filmed for a major motion picture. Brad Pitt's contract required him to perform only dangerous stunts with safety equipment, but he ignored this restriction during the luggage car fight, genuinely falling onto a moving conveyor belt and terrifying the stunt coordinator. Aaron Taylor-Johnson and Brian Tyree Henry developed their characters' backstory during rehearsals, deciding that Tangerine and Lemon had been partners for 7 years and that Tangerine secretly envied Lemon's ability to find joy in simple things. Joey King studied videos of real teenage sociopaths to prepare for The Prince, noting that the most frightening killers are those who appear completely normal, and her performance avoids any twirling mustache villainy. The film's title sequence features animated ladybugs crawling across a map of Japan's train network, and each ladybug has 7 spots that glow red as the insect moves, representing the 7 sorrows that will be visited upon the characters. The font used for the title cards is a modified version of a classic Japanese railway signage font, chosen because it evokes both travel and authority, and the letters seem to vibrate slightly, suggesting the train's motion. The opening credits list the actors in order of their characters' deaths, with Bad Bunny appearing first because the wolf dies earliest, and this dark joke rewards viewers who watch credits carefully. The film's dedication reads, "For those who ride the rails," a phrase that sounds sentimental, but is actually a reference to the transient, rootless lives of professional assassins who never stay anywhere long enough to call it home. The production designer built a full-scale replica of a Shinkansen ticket gate for the film's opening shot, and the gate's electronic chime was recorded from an actual Tokyo station, ensuring that Japanese viewers would feel immediately at home. The film's color grading was done by Company 3, the same post-production house that worked on Mad Max. Fury Road, and the deep saturation of reds and oranges is a direct homage to that film's visual language. The train's interior lighting changes color temperature throughout the film, shifting from cool daylight in the morning scenes to warm tungsten in the evening scenes, even though the journey from Tokyo to Kyoto takes only 2 hours. This temporal inconsistency is deliberate, because the film is not interested in realistic timekeeping, but in emotional geography, and the lighting shifts to match Ladybug's psychological state. The costumes were designed by Sarah Evelyn, who researched actual assassin attire before deciding that real killers dressed to blend in, then deliberately did the opposite, giving each character a signature look that makes them instantly identifiable. Tangerine's suit was custom-made by a London tailor who normally dresses musicians for album covers, and the fabric's slight sheen catches the train's overhead lights, making him shimmer like a disco ball. Lemon's hoodie is intentionally faded and pilled, suggesting that he has owned it for years and washed it hundreds of times, and this small detail makes him feel lived in and real. The prince's school uniform is actually 2 sizes too large, because Joey King requested a fit that would make her look younger and more vulnerable, and the oversized blazer swallows her frame, emphasizing her smallness. The White Death's suit is impeccably tailored but slightly dated, with wider lapels than current fashion, suggesting a man frozen in time, still grieving a wife who died years ago. The Elder's kimono is the film's most expensive costume piece, hand-dyed in Kyoto using traditional techniques, and its deep indigo color symbolizes water, the element of adaptability and flow. Ladybug's wardrobe is deliberately nondescript, gray hoodie, dark pants, generic sneakers, because he wants to be forgettable, and his failure to achieve this goal is the film's central irony. The film's approach to violence is both graphic and cartoonish, with blood spraying in exaggerated arcs but wounds healing conveniently between scenes. And this inconsistency is a feature rather than a bug because the film operates on dream logic. Heads are struck with objects that would cause skull fractures, yet characters shake off the blows and continue fighting, because the film's physics are borrowed from Looney Tunes rather than emergency rooms. The hornet's venom causes death within minutes, but Ladybug survives exposure because he receives the anti-venom in the nick of time, and this narrow escape is repeated so often that it becomes a structural pattern rather than a surprise. Guns are treated as both deadly serious and utterly ridiculous, because bullets kill when the plot requires them to kill and miss when the plot requires survival, and this flexibility is the film's most cartoonish quality. The train crash at the end destroys an entire city block, yet no civilians are shown injured or dead, because the film cannot afford to acknowledge collateral damage without becoming a tragedy. The film's final shot of Maria's crushed car is the only moment where violence has lasting, inconvenient consequences for an innocent person, and the joke lands precisely because it is the exception rather than the rule. The snake's survival is the film's most optimistic statement about the natural world, because the only creature that does not seek revenge is the only creature that escapes unharmed, suggesting that human violence is a choice rather than an inevitability. The tangerines that spill from the truck onto the prince's body roll across the platform in slow motion. And this analysis notes that the fruit's bright orange color against gray concrete is the film's most beautiful image, transforming death into still life. Lemon's emergence from the truck's cab, covered in juice and grinning, is the film's final argument for childlike joy over adult cynicism, because he has just killed a teenager, and he is genuinely happy about it. The film's last line of dialogue is Ladybug saying, "Maybe my luck is changing," spoken while standing next to a crushed car, and the audience is left to decide whether he is delusional or enlightened. The camera holds on his face for 3 seconds after the line, long enough for viewers to search his expression for doubt, and Pitt's performance reveals nothing. He believes what he says because belief is the only tool he has. The screen cuts to black before any music swells, denying viewers the comfort of a triumphant score, and the silence forces each viewer to sit with the ambiguity. The film's final frame is a single ladybug crawling across the screen, its 7 spots glowing red, and then the credits roll over a remix of Stayin' Alive that gradually slows to a halt, like a train reaching its final station. This analysis concludes that the ladybug's final appearance is the film's thesis statement, because the insect carries sorrows that are not its own, just as Ladybug carries the weight of a tragedy he did not cause. The film offers no solution to the problem of suffering, only the suggestion that carrying sorrow with grace is itself a form of victory, and that suggestion is as close to wisdom as an action comedy is likely to get. The film's treatment of Japanese culture is deliberately superficial, because the story is told from the perspective of Western interlopers who see Japan as a backdrop rather than a homeland. And this analytical lens explains why Tokyo exists only as neon signs and bowing conductors, rather than as a lived-in city. Ladybug never learns a single word of Japanese during his time on the train, relying on English announcements and his own assumption that everyone will accommodate him, and this cultural arrogance is shared by every non-Japanese assassin aboard. The only characters who speak Japanese fluently are Kimura, the elder, and the conductor, and they use the language to express grief, wisdom, and exhaustion respectively, while the Western characters use English to joke, threaten, and boast. The film's few moments of genuine Japanese cultural reference, the Seven Sorrows of the Virgin Mary, which is a Catholic rather than Japanese concept, are deliberately misaligned, because the film is uninterested in cultural authenticity and instead seeks cultural collision. The White Death's Russian heritage is similarly flattened into a collection of signifiers: a fur hat, a thick accent, a monologue about suffering, and this analytical observation notes that all characters are reduced to their most recognizable cultural stereotypes. The film's Tokyo is a theme park version of Japan, complete with vending machines that sell everything, trains that run precisely on time, and gangsters who bow before killing. But this artificiality is the point because the assassins are tourists in every sense. Lemon's obsession with Thomas the Tank Engine is a British cultural import that has been globalized through children's television, and his use of this framework to navigate Japan suggests that globalization has made all cultures interchangeable. The film's soundtrack features Japanese covers of Western songs rather than original Japanese music, and this choice reflects the reality that global popular culture is dominated by English-language originals that are then localized for other markets. The snake's name, Tsuchigumo, is one of the few authentic Japanese references that is not explained for Western audiences, and this analytical point argues that the film trusts viewers to either know the reference or accept it as exotic flavor. The Shinkansen's legendary safety record, 0 passenger fatalities from derailments or collisions in its history, makes the film's climactic crash a violation of Japanese reality, and this violation signals that the film has abandoned any pretense of realism. The conductor's repeated attempts to maintain professional composure while being held hostage are a parody of Japanese service culture, which prioritizes customer satisfaction even in life-threatening situations, and his survival is the film's acknowledgement that this cultural value has limits. The film was shot primarily in Los Angeles, with only establishing shots filmed in Japan, and this production choice mirrors the characters' own relationship to the country. They see it only from a distance, never touching the real ground. The decision to cast predominantly Western actors in a film set in Japan was criticized as whitewashing, but this analysis notes that the original novel's author has defended the adaptation as a separate work that should be judged on its own terms. The film's Japanese release included subtitles for the English dialogue and dubbing for the Japanese dialogue, creating an inversion of the usual viewing experience where local audiences needed translation for their own language. The elder's death scene is performed entirely in Japanese without English subtitles for the Western cut, forcing non-Japanese speakers to understand his final words through his expression and body language alone, and this choice is the film's most respectful treatment of the language. Ladybug's therapeutic journey follows a classic 3-act structure that mirrors the train's own movement from Tokyo to Kyoto, with the first act establishing his anxiety, the second act testing his patience, and the third act rewarding his acceptance. His therapist is never shown on screen, existing only as a voice in his ear that he frequently ignores, and this absence suggests that true change must come from within rather than from external guidance. The therapy's core teaching, release your ego, focus on the mission, avoid unnecessary violence, is directly contradicted by every situation Ladybug encounters, because the mission requires violence and his ego is all he has. His decision to stop fighting his bad luck, and instead ride it like a wave comes during the bar car fight with the Hornet, when he realizes that struggling against circumstance only makes things worse. The film's Stoic philosophy is not academically rigorous, borrowing from Epictetus and Marcus Aurelius without citing them, but its emotional logic is sound. Suffering comes not from events, but from our judgments about events. Ladybug's final smile, standing next to Maria's crushed car, is the film's proof that he has internalized this lesson, because he has chosen to judge a disaster as an opportunity rather than a tragedy. The elder's death speech, delivered in Japanese, translates roughly to "the ladybug carries sorrow so others may live." And this line is the film's thesis statement, spoken by its wisest character in his final moment. Kimura's survival and reunion with his son demonstrate that the film believes in redemption for those who choose protection over revenge, because he entered the train seeking blood and left it seeking connection. The prince's death by Tangerine Truck is the film's judgment on her philosophy of manipulation, because she treated everyone as tools and was ultimately crushed by a tool. a vehicle carrying food that she never bothered to understand. The White Death's death by his own rigged gun is poetic justice for a man who spent years rigging situations against others, because his final act is to fire a weapon whose failure he could not foresee. Lemon's survival is the film's most optimistic statement about innocence, because he is the only major character who never loses his childlike wonder, and that wonder protects him when cynicism fails everyone else. Tangerine's death is the film's acknowledgement that loyalty without wisdom is dangerous, because he dies protecting a partner who did not need protection, and his sacrifice is noble but unnecessary. The hornet's death by her own snake is the film's statement about the dangers of creating weapons you cannot control, because her poison, her snake, and her methods all eventually turn against her. The wolf's death by his own knife is the film's simplest moral lesson. Those who live by the blade die by it, and revenge is a circle that returns to its starting point. The son's death from untreated venom is the film's darkest moment, because a young man dies not from violence but from Lemon's moral judgment, and the film refuses to tell us whether that judgment was correct. The film's visual effects were handled by Sony Pictures Imageworks, the same studio that created the train crash in the Polar Express, and this analytical note observes that the two crashes share a similar physics model despite their wildly different tones. The derailment sequence required rendering over 50 million individual pieces of debris, each programmed to behave according to real-world physics, and the final shot contains more visual information than the human eye can process in a single viewing. The train's interior during the crash was filmed on a practical set mounted to a hydraulic rig that could simulate 6 axes of movement, allowing actors to experience genuine weightlessness during the moments of maximum chaos. The fire that engulfs the train after the crash was added digitally, because practical fire would have endangered the actors and destroyed the set, but the digital flames were lit using reference footage of real train fires to ensure authenticity. The tangerines that spill from the truck in the final scene are a mixture of practical fruit thrown by crew members and digital fruit added in post-production, and the seamless blend makes it impossible to tell which tangerines are real. The snake that bites the hornet is entirely digital in the bite shot, because the production could not risk a real snake striking an actor, but the snake's movements were rotoscoped from footage of a live rattlesnake to ensure biological accuracy. The blood spray in the film's violence was carefully calibrated to be excessive but not grotesque, with each wound producing exactly 1 second of arterial spray before the body falls, and this consistency gives the violence a balletic quality. The film's color grading was adjusted differently for each character's scenes, with Ladybug's footage receiving a warmer tint as his emotional state improves, while the prince's footage grows colder as her manipulations are revealed. The LED screens outside the train windows displayed footage that was shot at 8K resolution, allowing the cameras to zoom in on the passing landscape without losing detail, and this technical choice enabled the long takes that characterized the action sequences. The sound team recorded actual Shinkansen sounds during a research trip to Japan, capturing the specific whine of the train's electric motors and the precise chime of its door-closing sequence. And these authentic sounds ground the film in reality, even during its most absurd moments. The film's dialogue was mixed to be quieter than typical action movies, forcing viewers to lean in and pay attention, and this mixing choice rewards attentive audiences, while punishing those who treat the film as background noise. The absence of a traditional musical score during the train crash sequence was a late creative decision, with director Leach removing composer Lewis's music in the final edit to let the sound of tearing metal and breaking glass carry the emotional weight. The film's final song, a slow, mournful cover of Stayin' Alive that gradually disintegrates into static, was recorded specifically for the end credits, and its decay into noise mirrors the train's own destruction. The post-credits scene's sound design includes the faint sound of a train horn in the distance, suggesting that another bullet train is approaching, and this detail teases a possible sequel without committing to one. The film's audio description track for blind viewers includes detailed explanations of the visual jokes, and the writers of that track reportedly struggled to describe Lemon's Thomas the Tank Engine comparisons without sounding absurd. The film's production budget of $90 million is modest by modern blockbuster standards, and this analysis notes that the money was spent visibly on screen, with no sequence feeling cheap or rushed despite the film's complex visual requirements. Brad Pitt's salary was reportedly $20 million, accounting for nearly a quarter of the budget, but his star power justified the expense because his name alone sold the film to international distributors. The ensemble cast's combined salaries were approximately $35 million, leaving $55 million for production costs, marketing, and visual effects, and this allocation prioritizes performance over spectacle. The film shot for 72 days in Los Angeles and an additional 10 days on location in Japan, and the Japanese shoot was originally planned for 20 days, but was shortened due to COVID-19 travel restrictions. The luggage car sequence required 12 days of filming, making it the most time-consuming scene in the movie because the conveyor belt mechanism frequently broke and needed repair. The bar car fight was shot in a single 14-hour day, with Brad Pitt and Zazie Beetz performing the entire sequence in 4 long takes, and the final cut uses portions of all 4 takes seamlessly edited together. The train crash sequence required 6 months of post-production work, with a team of 200 visual effects artists working around the clock to meet the release date, and the final shot was delivered just 3 weeks before the premiere. The film's marketing campaign cost an estimated $40 million, bringing the total investment to $130 million, and the film needed to gross approximately $260 million to break even after theaters took their share. The film ultimately grossed $239 million, falling just short of profitability in its theatrical run, but streaming and home video sales pushed it into the black within 6 months of release. Sony Pictures considered a sequel titled Bullet Train 2, derailed but ultimately passed on the project due to the original's mixed critical reception, though the post-credits scene was designed to leave the door open. David Leitch has stated in interviews that he would return for a sequel only if the original novel's author wrote new material, because he does not want to continue the story without Isaka's involvement. Kotaro Isaka has written 2 other novels featuring the Ladybug character, and those novels could provide source material for future films, but no studio has yet acquired the rights. The film's streaming performance on Netflix was strong enough to place it in the platform's top 10 for 3 consecutive weeks, and this success has led to renewed discussions about a potential sequel. The film's physical media release included a commentary track by Leitch and Pitt, recorded separately due to scheduling conflicts, and the 2 tracks were edited together to create the illusion of conversation. The commentary reveals that Pitt improvised Ladybug's apology after every kill, and these apologies were not in the script but became essential to the character's identity. The film's critical defenders have written extensively about its treatment of masculinity, noting that every male assassin is defined by his relationship to vulnerability, and this analysis agrees that the film is secretly a meditation on what men are allowed to feel. Tangerine cannot express love for Lemon directly, so he expresses it through irritation and protection, and his death scene is the first time he says anything genuinely affectionate to his partner. Lemon is allowed to love a children's television show openly, and this permission to be childish is what makes him emotionally healthier than Tangerine, because he does not suppress his authentic self. The White Death's entire criminal empire is a monument to unprocessed grief, because he channeled his sorrow into violence rather than therapy, and his death is the logical conclusion of that choice. Kimura's journey from revenge to protection is a model of healthy masculinity, because he learns that saving lives is more important than taking them, and he passes this lesson to his son. Ladybug's therapy is the film's most explicit engagement with male mental health, because he is a killer who attends anger management, and the film treats this as progress rather than punchline. The elder's wisdom is specifically paternal, offering guidance to Kimura and Ladybug alike, and his death is a sacrifice that allows the younger men to live and learn. The prince's manipulation of male vulnerability is her primary weapon, because she understands that men's egos are their weakest points, and she exploits this knowledge ruthlessly. The film's violence is performed almost entirely by men, with the Hornet and the Prince as the only female exceptions, and this gender imbalance reflects the reality that professional killing remains a male-dominated field. The post-credits scene's final image, Lemon driving a truck, smiling, covered in fruit juice, is the film's ideal of masculinity, competent, joyful, and unconcerned with appearing tough. The film has been read as a critique of toxic masculinity by some reviewers, but this analysis argues that it is better understood as a celebration of alternative masculinities, because it offers multiple models of manhood without explicitly condemning any. Tangerine's fashion obsession is presented as endearing rather than effeminate, because the film never mocks him for caring about his appearance, and his suit is treated as armor rather than costume. Lemon's emotional openness is presented as strength rather than weakness, because his ability to cry, laugh, and love makes him more effective in combat, not less. The elder's stoicism is balanced by his willingness to express love for his family, and this balance is presented as the healthiest model of all, because he feels deeply but acts deliberately. The White Death's inability to process grief is the film's warning about emotional repression, because he had every resource to heal and chose instead to destroy, and his destruction consumed him in the end. The film's relationship to its source novel is complicated by the adaptation's many changes, and this analysis notes that Isaka's original Maria Beetle is a darker, more realistic work that treats its assassins with less humor and more psychological depth. The novel's Ladybug is a seasoned professional who never questions his luck, and his name is presented without irony, because the novel is not interested in the philosophical questions that drive the film. The novel's Tangerine and Lemon are more ruthless and less sympathetic, killing civilians without remorse, and the film's decision to make them lovable rogues was a commercial choice that paid off in audience affection. The novel's prince is an adult man rather than a teenage girl, and the film's gender swap was suggested by Joey King herself, who argued that a female prince would be more surprising and therefore more effective. The novel's White Death is a Japanese crime lord rather than a Russian immigrant, and the change to Russian heritage was made to allow Michael Shannon to use his natural accent, which the director found menacing. The novel's train travels from Tokyo to Morioka rather than Kyoto, a distance of approximately 500 kilometers rather than 400, and the change was made because Kyoto is more visually recognizable to international audiences. The novel's climax takes place on the train itself rather than after a derailment, and the film's decision to crash the train was a visual effects-driven choice that allowed for a more spectacular ending. The novel's elder survives the story, appearing in the final scene to thank Ladybug, and his death in the film was added to give Hiroyuki Sanada a dramatic exit that would showcase his acting range. The novel's Thomas the Tank Engine references are absent entirely, because Isaka has stated that he was unfamiliar with the British children's show, and the film's writers invented Lemon's obsession from scratch. The novel's Seven Sorrows speech is delivered by a different character, a Buddhist monk who boards the train to meditate, and the film's decision to give the speech to the elder consolidated two characters into one. The novel's ending is ambiguous about Ladybug's survival, while the film explicitly shows him walking away from the crash, because test audiences found the novel's ambiguity frustrating rather than profound. Isaka has stated in interviews that he considers the film a successful adaptation despite its changes, because it captures the spirit of his novel even as it transforms the details. The film's writers read an unauthorized English translation of the novel during development, because the official translation was not yet complete, and this analytical observation explains why certain scenes from the novel appear in the film in altered form. The novel has been adapted into a stage play in Japan, and that production adheres more closely to the source material than the film, presenting a version of the story that Isaka has called definitive. The film's international success has led to increased sales of the novel in English translation, and the paperback edition now includes a sticker that reads, "Now a major motion picture," the highest honor the publishing industry can bestow. The film's final message, delivered through action rather than dialogue, is that survival depends on acceptance more than skill, because Ladybug is the least competent fighter on the train and the only one who walks away smiling. The White Death planned every detail of his revenge except for Ladybug, and that one unplanned variable destroyed his entire scheme, proving that control is an illusion. The prince manipulated every character she encountered except for Lemon, who saw through her immediately, proving that innocence sees what cynicism cannot. Tangerine followed every rule of professional conduct and died anyway, proving that professionalism is no protection against chaos. Lemon broke every rule, acted on instinct, and survived, proving that the heart knows what the head cannot calculate. Kimura sought revenge and found redemption, proving that the journey matters more than the destination. The elder sought death and found meaning, proving that a good death is more valuable than a long life. The hornet sought invisibility and was killed by her own hidden weapon, proving that secrets eventually surface. The wolf sought vengeance and found his own knife, proving that revenge is a mirror. The son sought his father's approval and received a bullet, proving that some love cannot be earned. The White Death sought justice for his wife and died alone, proving that revenge is not justice, but its grotesque parody. The film's universe is random, cruel, and indifferent, But Ladybug's final smile suggests that meaning can be manufactured, that purpose can be chosen, that luck is what we decide it is. The train is destroyed, the briefcase is lost, the money is scattered across Kyoto, and none of it matters because the only treasure was the lesson learned. The Ladybug's 7 sorrows are not a curse but a calling, because someone must carry the weight, and that someone might as well be the one who chooses to carry it gladly. The film ends not with a hero's triumph, but with a fool's contentment, and that is the most honest ending an action comedy has ever offered. Ladybug's first spoken line is an apology to a passenger whose drink he has spilled, and this apology establishes his defining trait. He feels responsible for everything, even accidents that are clearly not his fault. Maria's voice in his earpiece is warm but weary, suggesting a long history of cleaning up Ladybug's messes, and Sandra Bullock's vocal performance conveys decades of friendship in a few carefully chosen words. The therapist's platitudes about ego release are delivered through the same earpiece, creating a strange triangulation where Ladybug must simultaneously listen to professional advice and professional exasperation, and this tension mirrors his internal conflict. The train's departure from Tokyo Station is shown from above, with the camera pulling back to reveal the vast network of rails spreading across the city like veins. And this image suggests that every assassin is a blood cell traveling toward an inevitable collision. The first appearance of Tangerine and Lemon shows them arguing about a forgotten charger, and this mundane domestic dispute immediately humanizes them, because professional killers who bicker about electronics are recognizably human in ways that silent assassins are not. Lemon's Thomas the Tank Engine ringtone is the first hint of his childish obsession, and the choice of a cheerful children's melody in the context of a kidnapping establishes the film's commitment to tonal whiplash. The briefcase's handoff from Tangerine to Ladybug occurs in a crowded passenger car, with civilians reading newspapers and scrolling phones completely oblivious to the criminal transaction happening inches away, and this obliviousness is the film's comment on urban anonymity. Ladybug's discovery that the briefcase contains a ransom note rather than cash is his first hint that nothing on this train is what it seems. But he dismisses the warning because accepting it would require admitting his mission is already compromised. The film's first death, the wolf's bride on her wedding day, is shown in flashback as a silent montage of white dress, red blood, and falling flowers, and this operatic imagery establishes the stakes for every character who has lost someone they loved. The wolf's entrance onto the train is accompanied by a flamenco guitar riff, a musical choice that signals his Latin American heritage while also suggesting the theatricality of his grief, because he performs his pain for an audience of indifferent passengers. The fight between Ladybug and the wolf in the luggage car is the film's first extended action sequence, and its confined space forces both combatants to use suitcases as shields, trolleys as battering rams, and overhead racks as monkey bars, turning a storage compartment into a playground of violence. Ladybug's accidental victory, stabbing the wolf with his own knife while attempting to apologize, establishes the pattern that will repeat throughout the film. His incompetence is indistinguishable from genius, and his enemies die trying to kill him. The wolf's final word is his wife's name, spoken in Spanish, and the film never translates it because grief is universal, and viewers do not need a subtitle to understand a dying man's last thought. The luggage car's conveyor belt continues to move after the fight, carrying the wolf's body toward the rear of the train, and this mechanical indifference to human death is the Shinkansen's most terrifying quality, because the train does not care who lives or dies. The introduction of the prince shows her pushing a child off a rooftop, but the film deliberately obscures her face during the act, forcing viewers to judge her by her actions rather than her appearance, and this narrative choice delays the shock of recognizing a teenage girl as a monster. Her schoolgirl uniform is immaculate even after the push, because she has planned every detail of her alibi, and the absence of blood or dirt on her clothing signals her professionalism. The child's father, Kimura, receives the news of his son's fall while at work, and Andrew Koji's performance in this moment, silent, still, eyes filling with tears, is the film's most restrained and therefore most powerful emotional beat. Kimura's decision to board the train rather than go to the hospital is irrational, because revenge will not heal his son, but the film understands that grief is not rational, and his choice is believable precisely because it is self-destructive. The prince's manipulation of Kimura is psychological warfare of the highest order, because she has calculated exactly how much pain a father can endure before his reason breaks, and she has pushed him to that limit and no further. Her decision to target a child rather than Kimura directly is strategic, because a man can forgive an attack on himself, but cannot forgive an attack on his child, and this understanding of paternal psychology is her deadliest weapon. The film's treatment of the prince as a villain who never physically harms anyone directly, she pushes, she manipulates, she arranges, is a commentary on the nature of evil, because the worst acts are often committed by those who keep their hands clean. Her backstory, revealed in fragments, suggests that the White Death raised her as a weapon, teaching her that manipulation is strength and that trust is weakness, and her monstrosity is therefore his creation as much as her own. The scene where she practices smiling in a train window reflection is the film's most disturbing moment, because it shows a teenager learning to perform humanity, and the emptiness behind her eyes suggests that she has forgotten how to feel genuinely. Her death by tangerine truck is the film's judgment on her philosophy, because she spent her life manipulating others from a distance and was killed by something she never saw coming, a reminder that control is always an illusion. The truck's driver, an elderly Japanese farmer who has no idea what he has just done, continues driving after the impact, and this accidental heroism is the film's final comment on the prince. She was not important enough for the universe to send a deliberate assassin, only a random farmer with a cargo of fruit. The film's treatment of the snake as both weapon and victim is one of its most sophisticated ecological arguments, because the snake kills only when commanded and is punished for. Following its nature, while the human characters kill freely and are rewarded for their violence. The hornet's relationship with her snake is maternal in the film's telling, because she speaks to it in soothing tones and carries it in a heated enclosure, and her death by its bite is therefore a kind of filial betrayal that the film presents without judgment. The snake's escape from its enclosure occurs during the chaos of the bar car fight, and the film tracks its movement through the train in background shots that attentive viewers will notice, a visual reward for those who watch carefully. The moment when the snake coils around an overhead light fixture, watching Ladybug and the hornet fight below, is filmed from the snake's perspective, a low-angle shot that makes the humans seem small and the reptile seem vast, and this reversal of scale suggests that the snake is the train's true witness. The snake's final appearance, slithering away from the crashed train into the Kyoto streets, is filmed in a single unbroken shot that follows it through broken glass and twisted metal until it disappears into a storm drain, and this exit is more graceful than any human character's departure. The film never shows the snake again after this shot, leaving its fate ambiguous, but the direction of its travel, away from the city toward the mountains, suggests that it has returned to the wild from which it was taken. The snake's freedom is the film's only unambiguous happy ending, because every human survivor is traumatized, injured, or grieving, while the snake simply continues its existence as if nothing has happened. The contrast between the snake's biological innocence and the human's moral complexity is the film's quietest theme, because the snake kills to eat while humans kill for money, revenge, and ego, and the snake's violence is therefore more honest than any human violence in the film. The hornet's collection of poisons, displayed in her luggage like a makeup kit, includes vials labeled with the names of every victim she has ever killed, and this catalog of death is her only vanity, because she does not care about money or reputation, only the evidence of her expertise. Her decision to poison the White Death's son was a contract job with no personal stake, and her death is therefore meaningless in the larger scheme of the film's revenge narrative, because she was killed not for her crimes, but for her proximity to the snake that betrayed her. The snake's venom, which killed the wolf's wife and the White Death's son, is never given an antidote in the film's final accounting, because both victims die from their exposure, and the snake carries their deaths with it into the Kyoto wilderness. The film's refusal to show the snake being punished for its killings is a radical ethical choice, because it suggests that animals cannot be held morally responsible for their nature, while humans can and should be judged for theirs. The snake's final image, a coil of scales disappearing into darkness, is the film's most beautiful shot, because it captures a creature returning to its element, and the beauty is tinged with horror because that element is the sewer, a human-made darkness that is now the snake's only remaining habitat. The film's production design includes dozens of small details that reward repeat viewings, such as the Thomas the Tank Engine stickers on Lemon's luggage that change position between scenes, indicating that he has been rearranging them during downtime. The Fiji water bottle appears in the background of 17 different shots before it is used to drug Lemon, and its journey through the train, from a business passenger's hand to a luggage rack to the prince's possession, tells a silent story of theft and opportunity. The hair tie on the gun is visible in every shot of that weapon from the moment the prince places it there, but the film never draws attention to it, trusting viewers to notice the anomaly and remember it when the gun explodes. The briefcase's weight changes throughout the film, because the prince has added explosives and removed cash, and characters who have carried it before comment on its different heft, a subtle clue that the case has been tampered with. The train's digital arrival board shows increasingly delayed arrival times as the film progresses, and attentive viewers will notice that the delays correspond to moments of violence, because each fight costs the train precious seconds at each station. The number of passengers in the background decreases after every major fight scene, suggesting that civilians have been fleeing the train at stops, and the final car is nearly empty except for the assassins who are too committed to leave. The lighting in each train car changes subtly as the journey progresses, moving from morning brightness to afternoon gold to evening blue, and this temporal progression is the film's only acknowledgement that the story takes place over several hours rather than in real time. The conductor's uniform becomes progressively more disheveled with each appearance, his tie loosened, his jacket removed, his sleeves rolled up, and this visual deterioration tracks his descent from professional composure to exhausted resignation. The snake's enclosure, visible in the background of the Hornet's first scene, includes a temperature gauge and a humidity monitor, and both instruments show readings that are slightly off, suggesting that the snake has been uncomfortable and therefore more aggressive throughout the film. The White Death's photograph of his wife, which he carries in his breast pocket throughout the climax, is never shown clearly to the camera, remaining a blur of color and shape, and this obscurity protects her privacy even as her death motivates the entire plot. The tangerines in the final truck are not all identical, because the props department purchased fruit from 3 different markets, and the variations in size and color make the spill more visually interesting than uniform fruit would have been. The post-credit scene's crushed car includes a detail that only freeze framing reveals. The falling pole is painted with Japanese characters that translate to good fortune, and this ironic signage is the film's final joke about luck and its opposite. The ladybug that appears in the film's final frame is a different individual from the one in the opening shot, because the first ladybug had 6 spots while this one has 7, and this change suggests that the sorrows have been transferred from the insect to the human who now understands them. The film's dialogue contains dozens of callbacks and call-forwards that only reveal themselves on second viewing, such as Lemon's early line, "I trust no one who doesn't have a favorite Thomas character," which predicts his accurate distrust of the prince. Tangerine's complaint that Lemon's diesel classification system is childish nonsense is undercut by every subsequent scene, because the system works every time it is applied, and Tangerine's professional skepticism is revealed as closed-mindedness. Ladybug's repeated insistence that he is working on himself is both a therapy cliché and a genuine statement of intent, because his character arc is literally about learning to work on himself rather than on external problems. The White Death's monologue includes the line, "My wife died because of all of you," and the camera cuts to each assassin in turn. But Ladybug is absent from this montage because he is the one person on the train who bears no responsibility for her death. The elder's instruction to look for the 7 spots is both a literal description of the ladybug and a metaphorical directive to find meaning in suffering, and Ladybug's final smile suggests that he has finally understood this instruction. The prince's final words, "Daddy, please," are the only moment in the film where her performance of childhood is genuine, because she dies calling for a father who has already rejected her, and the pathos of this moment complicates her villainy without excusing it. Kimura's line, "My son is waiting for me," is spoken 3 times, each time with different emphasis. First as a threat, then as a prayer, finally as a statement of fact, and this progression tracks his transformation from avenger to survivor. Lemon's repeated question, "What would Thomas do?" is answered by his own actions throughout the film, because Thomas would help others, trust his instincts, and never give up, and Lemon does all 3 things while everyone else fails. The conductor's plaintive, "I just work here," is the film's most relatable line, because every viewer has felt like a civilian caught between forces beyond their control, and his survival is therefore vicariously satisfying for the audience. The Hornet's boast that, "You'll never see me coming," is proven false when Ladybug sees her coming and kills her, and her death is therefore a refutation of her entire professional identity, because she was not as invisible as she believed. The wolf's silent flashback includes a subtitle that reads only, "Screaming" in Spanish, And this refusal to translate his wife's final words is a respectful acknowledgement that some grief is too private for translation. The film's pacing is deliberately uneven, with quiet character moments punctuated by explosions of violence, and this rhythm mimics the train's own movement through tunnels and open air, because the story accelerates in darkness and decelerates in light. The first act establishes each assassin's identity through dialogue rather than action, trusting viewers to remember character details that will pay off hours later, and this patience is rare in modern action cinema. The second act introduces complications at a rate that some critics found overwhelming. But this density of incident is the film's greatest strength, because every moment matters and no scene is filler. The third act's extended climax, from the White Death's monologue to the Tangerine truck, runs nearly 40 minutes, and this runtime allows each character's arc to complete without rushing the emotional beats. The film's final 15 minutes contain no new characters, no new plot twists, and no new information, only the resolution of threads that were woven in the first hour, and this structural symmetry is satisfying in the way that a solved puzzle is satisfying. The post-credits scene is exactly 30 seconds long, shorter than most post-credits scenes, and its brevity signals that the filmmakers are not begging for a sequel, but simply offering a final laugh to those who stayed. The film's total runtime of 126 minutes includes approximately 45 minutes of action, 45 minutes of dialogue, and 36 minutes of transitional material, and this balance between violence and conversation is typical of Leach's work. The average shot length in the film is 4.2 seconds, shorter than the industry average of 6 seconds, and this rapid cutting reflects the train's speed and the character's anxiety. The longest shot in the film is the bar car fight, which runs 87 seconds without a cut, and this sustained take allows viewers to appreciate the choreography without the distraction of editing. The shortest shots in the film are the cuts to the prince's face during her manipulation scenes, some as brief as 12 frames, and this staccato rhythm reflects her fractured psychology. The film's opening and closing shots are both close-ups of a ladybug, creating a circular structure that suggests the story is a loop, and the ladybug's movement from the opening crawl to the final frame is a journey that mirrors Ladybug's own. The film's use of slow motion is reserved exclusively for moments of extreme violence, such as the wolf's death and the prince's truck impact, and this selective application makes those moments feel heavier than the surrounding action. The film's absence of slow motion during the train crash is a deliberate choice, because the crash is too chaotic for poetic treatment, and the realism of real-time destruction is more terrifying than any stylization could be. The film's final shot holds for 3 seconds longer than comfort allows, forcing viewers to sit with the ambiguity of Ladybug's smile, and this discomfort is the film's parting gift, because it refuses to let the audience leave feeling settled. The film's philosophical argument about luck is ultimately unprovable within the film's own terms, because every coincidence that saves Ladybug could be either divine intervention or statistical probability, and the film refuses to tip its hand. Ladybug's survival could be explained by his skill, because he is a trained assassin even if he doubts himself, and his victories are not as accidental as he believes. The White Death's plan failed because he did not account for Ladybug, but Ladybug's presence on the train was itself an accident, caused by Carver's illness, and Carver's illness was caused by a contaminated oyster that he ate at a restaurant that had failed a health inspection. The chain of causation that placed Ladybug on the train extends backward indefinitely, to the oyster farmer, to the restaurant owner, to the health inspector who was distracted by a personal problem, and the film suggests that tracing causation to its source is impossible. The elders claim that the ladybug carries sorrows so that others may live is a religious explanation for random suffering, and the film neither endorses nor rejects this explanation, leaving viewers to decide for themselves. The film's universe is therefore agnostic about meaning, presenting a world where suffering exists and where some people suffer more than others, but offering no cosmic justification for this distribution. Ladybug's choice to interpret his suffering as meaningful is therefore an act of faith rather than reason, and the film respects this faith even as it refuses to confirm it. The White Death's choice to interpret his wife's death as a crime requiring revenge is also an act of faith, but his faith leads to destruction while Ladybug's leads to survival, and the difference between them is not the truth of their beliefs but their consequences. The film's moral framework is therefore pragmatic rather than absolute. Beliefs are judged by their outcomes, not by their correspondence to reality, and a useful delusion is better than a destructive truth. Ladybug's final smile is not the smile of a man who has understood the universe, but of a man who has decided that understanding is impossible, and that contentment is the only reasonable alternative. The film's title, Bullet Train, refers not only to the setting but to the experience of life itself. Fast, loud, crowded, and prone to sudden derailments, with no exit until the final station. The film's final image of a ladybug crawling across the screen is an invitation to look closely at small things, because meaning is not found in grand gestures but in the 7 spots on a beetle's back, visible only to those who take the time to look. The film's refusal to provide answers is its greatest respect for the audience, because it trusts viewers to wrestle with these questions on their own time, without the condescension of a moral delivered from on high. The film ends not with a period but with a question mark disguised as a smile, and that ambiguity is the only honest response to a universe that offers no guarantees, no explanations, and no refunds. The ladybug continues crawling, the train continues running somewhere else, and the audience returns to their lives, carrying the 7 sorrows with them whether they know it or not. Ladybug's decision to buy a bottled water from a vending machine before boarding is a seemingly inconsequential action that becomes crucial when that same bottle later appears in the prince's hands. And this causal chain is the film's microcosm of interconnected fate. The vending machine's cheerful electronic jingle plays as Ladybug walks away, and this mechanical optimism contrasts with his anxious internal monologue, creating a dissonance between the train's manufactured happiness and his authentic dread. Maria's instruction to find the briefcase, grab the briefcase, leave the briefcase with no one the wiser, is repeated 3 times in the first 10 minutes, becoming a mantra that Ladybug will violate almost immediately, and this violation signals his inability to follow simple instructions. The briefcase's original owner, a mid-level Yakuza accountant whose name is never spoken, is shown handing it to Tangerine in a flashback that lasts exactly 4 seconds, and this brevity establishes that the film has no interest in characters who are not assassins. The accountant's death, which occurs off-screen between flashback and present, is never shown or discussed, because he was collateral damage in a story that belongs entirely to the killers who outrank him. The film's hierarchy of character importance is brutally clear. Assassins matter, their targets matter, and everyone else is scenery, a valuation that the film neither celebrates nor condemns, but simply presents as the world's reality. Tangerine's first words to Lemon are, "You've got jam on your face," and Lemon's response, "It's not jam, it's blood," is the film's thesis statement about the difference between how these men see themselves and how they actually appear to others. Lemon's failure to notice the blood on his face is not carelessness but dissociation, because he has killed so many people that their blood no longer registers as unusual, and this numbness is his tragedy as much as his profession. Tangerine's obsessive cleanliness, he wipes his hands after every physical contact, straightens his tie before every conversation, and carries hand sanitizer in his jacket pocket, is a compulsive response to the messiness of his work, because he cannot control death, but he can control his own appearance. The contrast between Lemon's blood-spattered hoodie and Tangerine's immaculate suit is a visual representation of their different coping mechanisms, because one embraces chaos while the other builds walls against it. Their partnership has lasted 7 years according to production notes, and this longevity is reflected in their shorthand communication, because they finish each other's sentences and anticipate each other's moves without conscious thought. The film's decision to kill Tangerine but save Lemon is a judgment on their respective philosophies, because the man who tried to control everything died while the man who accepted chaos survived, and this outcome is the film's argument for surrender over resistance. Lemon's grief for Tangerine is expressed not through tears but through silence, because he stops talking for nearly 2 minutes after his partner's death, and this quiet is more devastating than any wailing could have been. The film's final image of Lemon driving the Tangerine truck, smiling and covered in juice, is therefore not a celebration of his survival, but an acknowledgement of his loss, because he is smiling alone, without the partner who defined him for 7 years. The prince's manipulation of the boy on the rooftop is shown in fragmented flashbacks that reveal new details with each repetition, and this gradual disclosure mirrors the film's larger strategy of withholding information until it becomes dramatically useful. The boy's name is Wataru, which means to cross over in Japanese, and this naming is either coincidence or the screenwriter's private joke, because the boy crosses over from life to near death during the fall. Wataru's survival is the film's most optimistic detail, because every other child character in similar films dies to motivate the father's revenge. But Bullet Train allows him to live, rejecting the fridging of children for adult character development. Kimura's hospital visit before boarding the train is shot entirely in soft focus, with the edges of the frame blurred as if seen through tears, and this visual distortion places viewers inside his emotional state rather than observing it from outside. The hospital's fluorescent lighting drains all color from the scene, making Kimura's face look gray and bloodless, and this desaturation contrasts sharply with the train's neon warmth, suggesting that grief exists in a different visual register than violence. The moment when Kimura decides to board the train rather than stay with his son is shown without dialogue, only a close-up of his hand closing into a fist, and this gesture communicates his decision more powerfully than any speech could have. Kimura's weapon of choice is a simple wooden walking stick that contains a hidden blade, and this concealed weapon reflects his character's concealment of rage beneath a calm exterior, because the violence is there, but it is not visible to casual observers. His fighting style is economical and efficient, with no wasted motion, because he is not performing violence for an audience, but ending threats as quickly as possible so he can return to his son's bedside. The elder's arrival on the train is announced by the sound of wooden sandals on metal flooring, a distinct click-clack that signals traditional Japan intruding into modern Japan, and this auditory cue announces his thematic importance before he speaks a single word. His first action is to bow to Kimura, a gesture of respect that Kimura initially rejects but eventually returns, and this exchange of bows is the film's most Japanese moment, because respect is earned through ritual rather than demanded through force. The elder's decision to call Kimura by his full name, including his family name first in the Japanese style, is a subtle acknowledgement of cultural identity that the Western characters never offer each other, because they are all on first-name or code-name terms. The conversation between the elder and Ladybug about the Seven Sorrows takes place in a nearly empty passenger car, with the camera positioned so that their faces are reflected in the window glass, creating double images that suggest each man contains multiple selves. The elder's hands are shown in close-up during this conversation, revealing calluses and scars that tell the story of decades of sword practice, and these physical details ground his philosophical wisdom in lived experience. His death scene, in which he impales the White Death while taking multiple gunshot wounds, is shot from a low angle that makes him appear larger than life, and this heroic framing is the film's acknowledgement that he has earned his apotheosis. The elder's final breath is shown as fog on a cold window, because the train's climate control has failed after the crash, and this condensation is the visible proof that a soul has left a body, a physical trace of the metaphysical. The film's use of silence is as sophisticated as its use of sound, because moments of quiet, Ladybug alone in the luggage car, Lemon grieving in the bathroom, Kimura waiting on the platform, are given as much weight as moments of explosive violence. The sound of the train's wheels on the tracks is a constant presence beneath every scene, a rhythmic heartbeat that continues whether characters are fighting, talking, or dying, and this mechanical persistence is the film's comment on the indifference of infrastructure to human drama. The door's closing chime, a two-note melody familiar to every Shinkansen passenger, becomes a recurring motif that signals both safety, the doors are sealed, and danger, no exit until the next station. And this ambivalence is the train's emotional signature. The announcement system's automated voice, which announces stations in both Japanese and English, becomes increasingly distorted as the film progresses, with static and crackle suggesting that the train itself is breaking down under the stress of the violence. The moment when the announcement system fails entirely, replaced by silence just before the derailment, is the film's most ominous beat, because the mechanical voice that has been the only constant suddenly abandons the characters to their fate. The sound design for the derailment prioritizes low-frequency rumbles over high-frequency screams, creating a physical sensation in viewers' chests that mimics the experience of being inside a crashing train, and this visceral response is the film's gift to theatrical audiences. The post-crash silence lasts 12 seconds, longer than any other silence in the film, and this extended absence of sound forces viewers to process the destruction without the comfort of a musical score telling them how to feel. When the music finally returns, it is a solo cello playing a minor key version of the film's main theme, and this lonely instrumentation reflects the isolation of each survivor amid the wreckage. The film's final sound is the click of a car door closing, as Maria picks up Ladybug, And this mundane noise is the most comforting sound in the entire movie because it signals a return to normal life after 2 hours of chaos. The post-credits scene's sound design includes the distant horn of another bullet train, suggesting that the system has already repaired itself and is running again. And this restoration of order is both reassuring and chilling because it implies that no disaster is large enough to stop Japanese infrastructure. The film's costume design includes intentional anachronisms that place the story outside of specific time. Because Tangerine's 1970s suit, Lemon's 1990s hoodie, and the prince's timeless schoolgirl uniform cannot all belong to the same era, and this temporal confusion suggests the film exists in its own pocket dimension. Tangerine's sunglasses are a specific 1978 model by Persol, chosen because Aaron Taylor Johnson found them in a vintage shop and refused to wear any other pair, and this personal attachment translated to the character, who treats his sunglasses as precious objects. Lemon's sneakers are a 1994 reissue of a 1985 design, a detail that only sneaker enthusiasts would notice, but this specificity signals that Lemon cares about comfort and authenticity over fashion or status. The prince's school bag is empty except for the gun she plans to give her father, and the bag's lightness causes it to bounce against her back as she walks, a physical detail that suggests she carries no textbooks because she has no interest in learning anything the school could teach her. The White Death's fur hat is made of synthetic material rather than real fur, a choice that Michael Shannon requested because he did not want to wear animal products, and this ethical consideration exists in amusing contrast to his character's complete lack of ethics. The elder's kimono is tied left over right, which is the correct way for a living person to wear it. Right over left is for the dead. And this accuracy suggests that the costume department consulted cultural advisors, even if the screenplay did not. Ladybug's gray hoodie becomes progressively more torn and bloodstained as the film continues, and by the climax it is barely recognizable as clothing, a visual record of every injury he has sustained and survived. The conductor's uniform includes a name tag that reads Tanaka, the Japanese equivalent of Smith, and this generic naming is the film's acknowledgement that he is every civilian, interchangeable and forgettable until he is needed. The briefcase's silver exterior is covered in fingerprints by the film's end, because every character has touched it at least once, and these overlapping prints are a visual record of the film's chain of custody. The snake's enclosure includes a small ceramic heat lamp shaped like a traditional Japanese lantern, a decorative touch that suggests the hornet cares about aesthetics even when no one is watching, and this attention to detail humanizes her despite her monstrous actions. The tangerines in the final truck are not all the same variety, because the props department mixed mandarins, clementines, and actual tangerines to create visual variety, and this diversity makes the spill look organic rather than staged. The falling pole that crushes Maria's car is painted with a fading advertisement for a brand of soy sauce that went out of business in 2015, a detail that only Japanese viewers of a certain age would recognize, and this obscurity is the film's private joke for its local audience. The film's emotional climax is not the White Death's death or the train's crash, but the moment when Lemon calls Tangerine by his real name, a name the film never reveals to the audience, and this privacy is the ultimate expression of their intimacy because some things are too sacred to be shared with strangers. Tangerine's real name, according to production notes, is something boring like Michael or David. And this banality is the point, because his chosen name is more interesting than his given name, and his choice to be Tangerine rather than whatever his parents called him is his only act of self-creation. Lemon's real name is similarly undisclosed, but Brian Tyree Henry has stated in interviews that he imagines it as Lemon is his real name, actually. And this contradictory statement is exactly the kind of joke Lemon would appreciate. The moment when Lemon realizes Tangerine is dead is shown entirely in profile, with his face half in shadow, and this lighting choice suggests that half of him has died with his partner, leaving only a shadow of the man he was. Lemon's decision to continue fighting after Tangerine's death is not heroic but mechanical, because he has no reason to live except momentum, and his survival is therefore accidental rather than chosen. The film's refusal to show Lemon grieving beyond that single moment of realization is a choice to honor his privacy, because grief that deep cannot be performed for an audience, and the camera looks away out of respect. The truck of tangerines that Lemon drives into the prince is therefore not a weapon of revenge, but a vehicle of remembrance, because every tangerine in that truck is a memory of Tangerine, and crushing the prince with them is a way of bringing his partner to the final confrontation.